Welcome to the Sleep Discovery, Plate Tectonics. What happens if Earth's engine stalls? Chapter 1. Beneath your quiet feet you walk, above a world in motion, though it feels so still. Beneath the roots of mountains, Earth's crust drifts like skin on heated breath. This is the beginning of the slow dance of plates, pressure, and patience. Tonight, you begin by listening for what you've always stood on. The planet's story is already humming beneath your toes. You begin tonight with your feet, planted, softly on whatever surface they rest. A warm blanket, a warm floorboard, the top of your bed, it doesn't matter. What matters is the illusion they give you, the sense of stillness. That quiet hush of being held by something so massive, so steady, you've stopped questioning it. But tonight, you will question it, not to shatter the comfort, but to deepen it. Because beneath you, as you breathe in and out, something ancient moves. Not fast, never fast, but always. The ground beneath your feet, that quiet floor, is just a crust, a kind of floating shell. You might imagine it like the cracked top of a creme brulee, browned and beautiful, but fragile. That shell is made of pieces, tectonic, plates that slide, collide, pull apart, and press together again, like puzzle pieces that never stop shifting, even when the whole picture seems still. These plates carry everything you know: mountains, oceans, continents, and islands. Your hometown, and all the places you've never been. Even now, while you rest, they inch along so slowly you could never feel it. But with enough time, they shape the world. It begins deep below, far beyond your skin, your bones, your bed. Imagine peeling back the layers of the earth, like the layers of a story. The first is the crust, the part you live on. It's thin, brittle, and fractured. Beneath that lies the mantle, thick, slow, and heavy with movement. The mantle is where things get warm, molten, almost but not quite a liquid, not like water or lava, though it feeds the latter. It flows, like warm wax. It heaves and sighs, driven by heat from the core, and as it moves, it carries the crust above like rafts on a churning sea. Close your eyes and feel it. This sea of stone, you can't hear it, you can't touch it, but you are, always riding it. Imagine yourself standing barefoot at the edge of a vast tectonic plate. Beneath you, the rock is moving, maybe just a few centimeters a year, but over millennia, that motion becomes transformation. Mountains rise, oceans form, continents wander. You might ask, how do we know this? How do we see something that takes eons to unfold? We read the clues in rock, lines of ancient volcanoes, patterns of earthquakes, seafloor stripes where magma once spilled and froze. Geologists are Earth's memory keepers. They read the landscape like a diary, pages etched in basalt and granite. They know where continents have kissed and broken apart. They follow fault lines like stitches in a wound that never quite healed. Think of the Himalayas. Those towering peaks are not eternal. They are still growing, inch by inch, as India presses north into Asia. The ground there shudders, quietly or violently, whenever tension becomes too much. And even those great mountains, tall enough to scratch the sky, are but ripples. In the crust, now, shift your imagination outward. Fly with your mind, slowly, gently, above the earth. Picture its surface not as static land and sea, but as drifting sheets, like lily pads floating on thick, slow syrup. Some plates slide past each other. That's what happens along California's San Andreas Fault. Others pull apart, like at the mid-Atlantic ridge, where new ocean floor is born. And some crash together, birthing mountains, volcanoes, or deep ocean trenches. This movement is called plate tectonics. It is the language of Earth's bones. It is slow, it is ceaseless. It is tender and violent all at once, and it gives the Earth its breath, because without tectonic motion, nothing would change. Volcanoes wouldn't form. Mountains wouldn't rise. There'd be no earthquakes, no jolts of energy released like sighs under pressure. But there'd also be no recycling of crust, no fertile volcanic soil, no shaping of habitats. Plate tectonics is the Earth dreaming itself into new forms. It breaks and rebuilds. It hides the past and prepares the future. And you, in this moment, are resting on top of that dream. Pause, breathe, feel your breath match the planet's rhythm. It's not a rhythm of seconds or minutes, but of millions of years. Still, it beats. You might be wondering, why do the plates move at all? What keeps this ancient dance alive? It begins in the core, the heart of the planet. The Earth's core is hot, hotter than the surface of the sun in places. That heat rises through the mantle in convection currents. Like soup swirling in a pot, the mantle churns, and as it does, it pulls the plates above it. This is not forceful or sudden. It is patient, like wind slowly shaping dunes, or waves smoothing stones. Over time, this gentle push reshapes the entire world. Some scientists call this process dynamic equilibrium, a moving balance. It reminds you that even what seems solid can flow. Even what feels permanent can drift. Let's return, just for a moment, to where you are now. Your room, your bed, the air around you, still and quiet. But beneath it all, motion continues. The plate you rest upon might be sliding past another, or rising ever so slightly, or sinking beneath the ocean. You cannot feel it, but the Earth remembers, and here's something soft to hold on to. This movement, this planetary pulse, has been going on for billions of years. Long before you arrived, long after you're gone, you were held in its middle. A brief, delicate moment in a long, long story. Let that bring you peace, not fear, because you are part of something vast and steady, even as the world shifts. It does so with grace, not chaos, but choreography, and sometimes it speaks in earthquakes, yes, but also in places where magma reaches the surface. Volcanoes bubbling with molten memory, or hot springs steaming from depths you'll never see. These are the whispers of the deep dot. Listen closely. The Earth is not silent. It hums through vibrations in the ground. It tells its story through rock layers, fault lines, and folded hills. And if you listen with your imagination, you can hear it. The sound of continents drifting, the slow tearing of an ocean basin, the quiet closing of a prehistoric sea. Each movement leaves traces, minerals rearranged by pressure, fossils lifted from ocean floors to mountaintops, islands formed from lava, cooling mid-air. It's all written down, just not in ink. Sometimes, at night, you might feel very small. That's natural. You live on a planet that could fit 1,000,000 Earths inside the sun. You are one heartbeat on a timescale of eons. But within that smallness, there is comfort. Because though you are brief, you belong to this slow-moving wonder. You are carried by it, cradled by it. The planet is not just where you live. It is living to dot. So the next time you stand barefoot on the ground, or rest your head against the pillow, remember, you are floating not in water, but on rock. and that rock floats, too moved by the warmth beneath. Let the image linger in your thoughts. Tectonic plates, silent but in motion, the mantle, warm and alive, the crust, cracking, forming, drifting, your feet somewhere on that crust, not lost, not alone, but part of the drift, part of the breath, part of the dance. And as you drift toward sleep tonight, know that Earth is still turning, still pulsing, still making room for mountains yet unborn. And somewhere deeper still, beneath even the drifting plates, the story continues. A place, not of rock, but of flowing heat and silent power, where pressure builds and molten dreams swirl. A place that waits, glowing quietly in the dark, for the next chapter to unfold. Chapter 2. The puzzle of broken shells, the countenance once fit together like a child's scattered jigsaw. You drift back to the supercontinent Pangaea, where ancient trees swayed as one. Why do continents move, and what makes them break? You feel. The tension at Earth's seems pulled slowly apart by forces unseen. In their drifting silence, old continents whisper truths. Tonight, you float backwards in time, not quickly, not with a rush, but softly, like a feather caught in a breeze of memory. The present peels away, layer by layer, until only silence remains, and in that stillness, something vast begins to take shape. Not the Earth as you know it. No familiar outlines, no isolated countenance. Instead, there is one great landmass, a supercontinent, a single shape, surrounded by an endless, ancient sea. You are drifting over Pand. ATA, it is not the beginning of the Earth's story, but a deep chapter within it. Roughly 335 million years ago, this vast continent formed a moment in geological time when scattered plates collided and fused. What we now call North and South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Antarctica, Australia, they were once folded together like petals of the same flower. You float above it. Mountains ripple across its skin like wrinkled knuckles of an old breathing world. Dense forests stretch from edge to edge, tree ferns, towering lycopods, strange barkless giants. Dinosaurs do not yet walk here, but the land stirs with ancient reptiles, insects with wingspans like birds, and the air carries a quiet unity, as if the Earth, for a moment, exhaled as one dot. Now breathe with it. What must it feel like to be whole? To be held together at every edge, every border tucked against another. You may imagine the land content, but deep beneath, the mantle never rests. Even when the crust above seems quiet, the heat below churns like thought, and thought, when it simmers long enough, eventually acts. Let's stay with this thought. What causes such a giant to break? How does something so big, so still, come undone? It begins quietly. Heat, building deep in the mantle, causes the underlayer to swell. That swelling becomes tension, a stretching at the seams, and slowly, invisibly, the shell of the world begins to tear, not in loud cracks, but in whispers, soft rifts that grow over millions of years. One plate pulls one way, another drifts apart. A seam becomes a valley, then a basin, then a new ocean. The supercontinent begins to fracture. Pangaea does not shatter like glass. It unravels like a memory, slowly, unevenly, across deep time. A piece here, another there. Land pulled apart, carried away by the unseen breath of Earth. Picture it. Africa moves east. North America drifts westward, away from Europe. India, a lost wanderer, sails north across the Tethys Sea, heading toward a collision that will one day raise the Himalayas. You are witnessing continental drift, not as a theory in a textbook, but as movement, as music, as slow, deliberate choreography unfolding beneath the surface. You may wonder, how did we first realize that continents move? It took time. For centuries, the idea was too strange to consider. Land was supposed to be solid, fixed, the very meaning of permanence. But clues were left behind, as all good mysteries do. In the early 20th century, a curious German meteorologist named Alfred Wegener looked at the edges of continents and saw a pattern. South America and Africa, their coastlines almost fit, like torn paper once whole. But it wasn't just the shapes. Fossils of the same extinct plants and animals were found on both sides of the Atlantic. Mountain ranges matched across oceans, coal deposits in Antarctica, glacial scars in Africa. Too many coincidences, too much symmetry for it to be chance. Wegener proposed something radical. The continents were once joined and had drifted apart. He called it continental drift, and at first the world laughed. No one could explain how solid rock could move. The mechanism was missing, the breath behind the motion. It took decades before science caught up. Only in the mid-20th century, with sonar maps of the ocean floor, did we begin to see the Earth's broken puzzle clearly. Beneath the waves, at the center of oceans, ran vast mountain chains, the Midochain ridges. From these ridges, new crust was being born. Lava pushed upward, cooled, and became part of the seafloor. As more lava emerged, the older crust was pushed outward, slowly, steadily, like a conveyor belt of stone. This was seafloor spreading, the missing mechanism. And it explained what Wegener couldn't. It proved the Earth's surface moves. Not all at once, not everywhere, but always in its own deep time. Think of the continents not as rigid islands, but as rafts floating on the soft mantle below. They bump, drift, sometimes break, sometimes merge again. Pangaea was not the first supercontinent. Before it, there was Rodinia, and before that, Columbia. Earth's history is a rhythm of assembly and breakage, coming together, falling apart, reuniting differently. You, too, have felt this rhythm in your own life. Friendships that shift, places you once belonged to, drifting into memory, moments of union and moments of parting. The Earth moves this way, to dot, and like you, it leaves behind clues. Let's follow one. Imagine walking through the red sands of Namibia. You kneel and pick up a stone, rough, rust-colored, flecked with quartz. Now, imagine that same stone. Mirrored in Brazil, same minerals, same layering, same age. Once, they were neighbors. Now, they are strangers, continents apart. But the stone remembers. The stone does not forget. Every mountain range that ends abruptly at a coastline, you might find its twin across the sea. Every fossil of an ancient fern or reptile found on multiple continents, once joined in a single breath. These are the puzzle pieces, laid out over millions of years, waiting to be seen. And when you step back, far, far back, you begin to glimpse the full picture. A living puzzle, never quite finished. Edges that shift, shapes that evolve. A world that is not static, but fluid. Like music that rewrites itself. And all of this slow, ceaseless drift, is not random. It is guided by heat, by pressure, by the inner workings of Earth's mantle. The plates move because the planet breathes, and the breath moves through the broken shell. Now, imagine yourself as part of that breath, you, floating gently, not above the earth, but within its story. The drift is not something that happened long ago, it's happening now. Under your quiet feet, every year, continents move a few centimeters, maybe the length of your fingernail. In a human life, you might move a few meters without knowing, but in a million years, an entire ocean could open. A mountain range could vanish. Even now, the Atlantic grows wider, while the Pacific shrinks, folding inward like a closing eye. Someday, far in the future, a new supercontinent will rise. They call it Pangaea Ultima, though names are only guesses. It may gather near the equator, or loop around the Arctic. It may last 100 million years, or vanish before we ever see it. And just as our age has left traces in plastic, steel, and carbon, that supercontinent will have its own story to tell. But tonight, you are still with Pangaea, watching it slowly dissolve, the ancient forests fading, the continents drifting like ships into the unknown, and you begin to wonder, if land can move like this, what else that seems solid might be quietly changing beneath the surface? Not just rock and water, but history, memory, understanding. Ideas once fixed, now fluid. Truths broken open by time and perspective. Perhaps you, too, are part of a greater drift, shaped by unseen forces, tugged gently by questions you haven't yet asked. The continents continue their journey, not aimless, but full of purpose, hidden. In deep time, let that idea rock you gently. Let it quiet the part of you that clings to stillness. Because the world is never still, and yet it holds you calmly, faithfully. You are not lost in its movement. You are part of its rhythm. And somewhere ahead, not far now, you'll reach the place where land is made new again, where the earth doesn't just move, but builds, fresh from fire, deep from beneath, a place where crust is born, where the ocean floor breathes heat and life, and the journey, like the planet, continues to rise. Chapter 3. The molten breath of the mantle beneath the crust. The mantle swells and sighs, not liquid, not solid, but something in between. You float above hot convection cells that push countenance without hurry. Here, heat moves like ancient breath rising through stone lungs. This is the engine, slow, vast, and unseen, powering all life above. And it never stops, unless you begin tonight, not on the surface, but just below it, below the soil, the stone, the drifting plates. You begin where the earth breathes. Close your eyes and picture the crust, that thin, cool shell you've come to trust. Imagine peeling it gently away, like a blanket drawn back to reveal warmth beneath. And there it is, the mantle, not liquid, not quite solid, but something in between. It moves not with the speed of wind or waves, but with the patience of time itself. Slow currents of rock, hot and thick like honey in winter, stretch and rise, cool and sink. This is the earth's slow circulation, its breath, its pulse. You drift above it now, weightless, unhurried, as though held aloft by invisible thermals rising from stone. Beneath you, the mantle swells in great convection loops, up and down, rising and falling, like lungs of molten stone. You are inside the earth's great exhale. The mantle is vast. It stretches from just below the crust all the way down to the outer core, some 2,900 kilometers deep. And though you'll never touch it, never see it, it touches everything. It powers volcanoes. It moves continents. It builds mountains and swallows oceans. It is the engine room of the planet, the place where the surface gets its motion, where the plates find their push. Imagine watching it from inside. The rock doesn't flow like water, it creeps. Takes 100 years to move a few centimeters, but that's enough, because time is its partner. Over millions of years, this slow, creeping current becomes a force strong enough to remake the world. This is mantle convection, the deep, quiet driver of everything that happens above. You drift over a rising plume. Hot rock, heated from the deep core, becomes just buoyant enough to lift. Up it comes, slow as thought, spreading sideways as it nears the crust. And then, in its cooling, it sinks again, falling back into the depths like a sigh. This cycle never ends. It is the great breath of stone. And here's the wonder. Though the mantle is rock, it flows. Not because it is soft, but because it is hot. Because deep time makes even stone behave like air. You float there, feeling that flow, as if the world itself is cradling you in its warmth. Its story unfolding not in pages, but in ripples of heat and pressure. Sometimes those rising plumes reach all the way to the surface. They melt through the crust and erupt as volcanoes. These are called hotspots, and they tell tales of the mantle's breath rising high enough to spill. Hawaii is one such tale. A chain of islands, each formed by lava bubbling through a single point in the crust. But the Pacific plate moves. So over time, the hotspot stays and the islands drift. Each new island borne slightly to the northwest of the last. A trail of volcanic footprints across the ocean. The mantle doesn't speak in words. It speaks in islands, in lava, in pressure, in heat. You float lower now, drawn deeper into the folds of the mantle. Colors shift around you, glowing ochre, deep maroon, shadows of molten orange. There is no light here, but still, you see. Not with your eyes, but with your imagination. An imagination is enough. Picture a place where solid rock flows like glass, where heat moves in currents, soft as silk, but strong as centuries, where every fold in the mantle is a line in the earth's story. You drift past convection cells, each the size of continents, like turning gears made not of metal, but molten minerals. Upwelling here, downwelling there. A planetary waltz, measured not in beats, but in eras. Here is where new crust begins, where the pressure of rising heat stretches the overlying plate, pulls it apart, lets magma rise. And when that magma cools, stone is born at the mid-ocean ridges. This birth happens slowly, but always. A seam in the seafloor opens, new basalt emerges, and the old crust is pushed aside. The Atlantic Ocean grows wider by just a few centimeters a year. You float above one now, the mid-Atlantic ridge running like a spine down the center of the ocean, invisible from above, but alive in the deep. Here, the mantle breathes outward, and in doing so, it moves everything. Now, drifts sideways to a place where the mantle's breath sinks, where the crust dives down into the deep again. This is subduction, the recycling of plates. Here, old ocean crust, dense and heavy, is pulled beneath a neighboring plate. It melts into the mantle once more, becoming part of the flow, the breath, the endless cycle. You hover over a subduction zone, a deep trench near the edge of a continent. Above it, volcanoes wait, built from the heat and moisture pulled down into the earth. This is how continents change, how coastlines reshape, how earthquakes are born when the plates stick and then suddenly slip. You listen now to the quiet grumble of slow motion, to the creak of stone moving under stone. It is not loud, but it is always there. And above all this, life flourishes. Mountains rise, rivers flow. Ecosystems thrive on the soil made fertile by volcanic ash. Continents drift, and with them, life evolves, adapts, explores new paths. All because the mantle breathes. Without this movement, there would be no plate tectonics, no mountain ranges, no deep oceans, no continents as we know them. Perhaps not even life, because this breath, this churning heat, releases gases, shapes climates, cycles carbon, feeds ecosystems with minerals born in fire. Pause and imagine a world without a mantle that moves, a planet with no convection, no volcanoes, no earthquakes, no drifting plates. It would be quiet, still, cold. Eventually, the surface would become brittle, the core would cool, and Earth would stop becoming. You drift deeper to the boundary between the mantle and the core, a place called the D layer, mysterious, blurry, and rarely glimpsed. It's here that the deepest heat rises. It's here that mantle plumes are born, the very breath that moves everything above. And in this mysterious zone, some scientists believe ancient slabs of crust may rest, sinking slowly, like memories, into deep sleep, waiting, perhaps, to rise again. This cycle, crust sinking, melting, rising, has continued for billions of years. It is the way the Earth reshapes itself, the way it forgets and remembers. Now you rise again, lifted gently by the breath of rising heat, floating back through the mantle, feeling the soft current wrap around you, like a lullaby made of stone. You surface slowly through the crust, back into the world of air and light and sky, and you carry with you a new kind of stillness, not the stillness of nothing moving, but the stillness of understanding something deeper is always at work. You rest on the surface again, but now you feel the gentle push below, the warmth that powers volcanoes, moves continents, and renews the very crust beneath your feet. You are part of it, not just a passenger on Earth's surface, but a traveler through its breath, a witness to its quiet motion, a dreamer held in its warm, slow rhythm. And as you lie here, eyes soft and drifting, you wonder what happens when this mantle breath reaches the surface. What do we see when the Earth opens its mouth and exhales fire? A mountain of ash, a river of light, a land reshaped in a single night. You are almost there, almost to the place where breath becomes eruption, where the hidden becomes seen, where molten dreams rise to meet the air. Chapter 4. Mountains made of waiting. Every mountain you've ever seen is a monument to time's gentle shove. Folded rocks, crushed roots, silent snow on jagged teeth, all born from collision. You trace the slow crumpling of countenance inch by inch, year by year. Even Everest was once a whisper rising. But what if the rising ends? Tonight you stand before a mountain, not to climb it, not to conquer it, just to watch, to listen, to feel the weight of time resting in its ridges. The moonlight brushes across its flanks. Snow glows at its peak. A stillness lives here, but it is not quiet. Not really, because a mountain is not born from peace. It is born from pressure. Every mountain you have ever seen, from the low, rolling hills to the jagged edges of the Himalayas, began as something softer, something flat, something broken. They are made, not in moments, but in millions of years of waiting. You sit quietly at the mountain's base, breathing slowly, and you begin to trace its story backwards. Not long ago, geologically speaking, this land may have been a plain, a seabed, a flat stretch of crust waiting for its moment to rise. Then, two tectonic plates met. They didn't crash with sound or fury. They pressed, like two slow hands pushing against each other, relentless, patient, unstoppable. And in that pressing, that slow, unyielding pressure, the crust crumpled, rocks folded over one another, layer after layer, like pages in an ancient book. Sediments, once laid down by rivers or oceans, were lifted, tilted, and twisted. Stone bent like dough under forces too deep and slow to see. This is origin, the process of mountain building. It happens when continents collide, not all at once, but inch by inch, a centimeter a year, maybe less, but after 10 million years. That's 100 kilometers of uplift, a monument carved by invisible hands. You might imagine a mountain as a single sharp shape, but it is not one shape. It is thousands. Every ridge, every slope, every fold tells a different part of the same story. A story of compression, of resistance, of refusal to flatten. Some mountains rise because the crust thickens from below. Others form as slabs of rock are shoved over one another, a process called thrust faulting. And some, like the Himalayas, rise because an entire continent is still being forced beneath another. India is still pushing into Asia, still folding the earth, still lifting Everest, millimeter by millimeter. Even now, you picture Everest, its summit wrapped in stars, snow swirling like breath from the sky. But once long ago, that very rock sat at the bottom of an ancient ocean. You can still find seashell fossils near its peak, proof that the summit of the world was once a silent seafloor. Imagine that. Imagine waiting millions of years, just to be lifted toward the sky. Now close your eyes, feel that slow rising beneath your own body, the lift of ancient collisions beneath your feet. You are always being carried by something moving, even when it feels still. And as you float above these mountains, you begin to notice their shapes are not sharp everywhere. Some are jagged, newly formed. Others are soft, worn down by wind and water, because what rises must eventually fall. Every mountain, no matter how grand, is always dissolving. Erosion is a patient sculptor. Rain becomes rivers, ice becomes glaciers. Winds howl across peaks, breaking stone into sand. It is a slow undoing, a return to something simpler, and yet the mountains do not resist. They allow themselves to be changed, to be worn, smoothed, lowered, even as the crust pushes them up from below. The surface gently takes them down from above, creation and erosion in quiet balance. You begin to see this now. Mountains are not just built, they are maintained, held. In a moment between rise and ruin, a mountain range lives a long life, not just a birth and a death, but a whole middle, stretching across millions of years. Take the Appalachians, once as tall as the Himalayas, now soft and rounded, like sleeping giants, their rugged youth worn away by rain and time. Or the Alps, still growing, still crumbling, a place where geologic birth and decay meet in every stone. Even the Andes, spine of South America, rise from the subduction of the Nazca Plate beneath the continent. They burn with volcanic fire, yet wear ice crowns, a balance of heat and cold, lifting and eroding. And as you drift across these ranges, you notice the patterns in the folding. Rocks bent like ribbon, colors swirling in stone, red iron, grey slate, black basalt. They fold because they are caught in a choice, break or bend. Many break, some bend, and some remarkably do both, cracking on one side, curving on the other. These folds are not chaotic, they are maps of force, a record of the directions the earth once pushed from below, and if you listen closely, the rocks almost speak, not in words, but in layers, each one a memory of a seabed, a riverbed, a desert wind that once carried dust across the globe, now frozen into cliffs, stacked high by the slow press of time. This is the miracle. A mountain is a memory of time, of movement, of waiting for heat, waiting for pressure, waiting to be lifted. But even mountains have limits. At some point, the pressure fades, the plates stop colliding, the crust settles, the rising ends, and then erosion takes over. The sculptor becomes the master, and what was once built with force is softened by patience. You might ask, what happens when no new mountains form? What if the earth stops pushing? What if the engine below quiets? The plate still, the crust cools. What becomes of a world with only falling and no more rising? That's a question for a future far beyond ours. A cooling earth, a silent mantle, a still crust. But not tonight. Tonight, the mountains still breathe, still climb, still speak in their slow, wordless language. And you are a part of that story. You may not live across geologic time, but geologic time lives within you. Calcium in your bones from ancient seashells, iron in your blood from mountain stone, carbon in your cells from forests pressed into coal. You are made of waiting, of layers, of quiet collisions, of rising, and perhaps like the mountains, you are learning how to bend without breaking, to rise slowly, to wait without rushing, to be changed but not erased. Let that thought settle like snow on your shoulders. You stand again at the mountain's base, not to move forward, but to breathe, to understand, to feel the weight of the world, not as a burden, but as a story carried in stone. And just as you close your eyes, you feel something warm ripple through the ground, a hint, a tremble, because deep below the mountains, beyond the folds and thrusts, there is more still rising, not just rock, but fire, a molten whisper that pushes upward, shaping the land with heat instead of pressure. You are almost there too. The places where volcanoes wait in silence, and molten memory dreams of daylight. Chapter 5. When oceans open and close, ocean basins are not forever. They open, widen, then close, like breath. Tonight, you follow the life of an ocean, its birth, its middle age, its death. Sea floors grow, stretch, and sink in quiet surrender. The Atlantic is growing. The Pacific is shrinking. But nothing stays open forever. You begin tonight by floating, weightless, over a dark, open sea. The surface gleams with starlight, but your thoughts drift downward, to a place you cannot see, a place where oceans are born and where they end, because oceans, too, have lifespans. They are not eternal. They breathe, opening, widening, closing, like the quiet rhythm of sleep. Let yourself sink gently now, not into the water, but into the idea that even oceans are temporary. You are about to follow the life of a sea, not the waves, not the tides, but the vast bowl beneath them, the seafloor that holds their weight. It begins with a crack, somewhere in the middle of a supercontinent, a seam appears. The land stretches just a little, then a little more. The crust thins, splits. From deep below, magma rises into the gap. At first, the rift is narrow, a few valleys, a string of volcanoes. But it widens. Over thousands, then millions of years, the land pulls apart, and an ocean begins. This is oceanic rifting, and it is the first breath of a sea. Imagine Africa and South America, once pressed tightly together, now drifting apart. Between them, the Atlantic Ocean was born. At its center lies a long, winding mountain chain, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Here, new crust is made, where magma rises and cools. The seafloor spreads outward, pushing continents slowly away from each other. This is seafloor spreading the slow growth of the ocean's bones. You float above this underwater ridge now. It looks like a scar, but it is more like a seam stitched in fire. On either side, the ocean floor moves gently away, like fabric unrolling from a bolt. But this movement is not loud. It is as soft as breath, just a few centimeters each year. Over time, the ocean widens, the basin deepens, water floods the space between, and a new ocean is born. This is the youth of an ocean, wide-eyed, growing, full of potential. But oceans, like stories, have chapters, and youth does not last forever. Eventually, the plates on either edge begin to feel a different pull. Instead of drifting apart, some begin to drift together again. This is the beginning of middle age. The mature ocean basin, picture the Pacific Ocean, vast, ancient, but shrinking. Around its edges, the oceanic plates are sliding beneath continents, a process known as subduction. Where this happens, trenches form deep scars on the sea floor. The Mariana Trench, the Peruccioli Trench, places where old ocean crust is pulled down into the mantle, melted, recycled. Above these trenches, volcanoes rise. Island arcs curve across the sea. Japan, the Philippines, the Aleutian Islands. This is no longer a place of growth. It is a place of return. The ocean, once stretching wide, now begins to close. You drift gently along the ring of fire, the volcanic belt circling the Pacific. Here, the earth both remembers and remakes. Ocean floor disappears into the deep, and the continents respond with fire. Mountains rise from this struggle. New land forms at the edges, but the basin itself, the open space, shrinks. And now, you begin to wonder what happens when an ocean finishes closing. You're about to find out. The last stage in the life of an ocean is one of final convergence. The seafloor is almost gone. Subducted beneath the continents it once separated. The ocean narrows until it is little more than an inland sea. Then, the continents collide. This is continent-continent collision, a moment when ocean crust is gone and two massive plates meet head-on. There is no more room to subduct. The crust cannot sink, so it rises and rises. Mountains form from this wreckage, not volcanic peaks, but folded rock, crushed seabeds, layer upon layer lifted high. You've seen the results of this. The Himalayas, born when the Tethys Ocean closed, and India crashed into Asia. The Appalachians, remnants of an even older closure, when Africa collided with North America, long before the Atlantic was born. Even the Alps and the Zagros Mountains tell the same story of oceans that once opened wide, then slowly folded shut. This is the Wilson cycle, the rhythmic opening and closing of ocean basins. Named not for a poet, but for a geologist, J. Tuzo Wilson, who saw the pattern in the plates. It spans hundreds of millions of years. A full ocean life, from birth to death, takes longer than the rise and fall of species, empires, even entire mountain ranges. But the Earth remembers it. And now, so do you. Let's return to the Atlantic. It is still young, still growing, but in 100 million years, it, too, will begin to close. A new rift may form somewhere else. Perhaps beneath East Africa, where the continent is slowly splitting apart from that new wound. Another ocean may rise, and so the cycle begins again. You breathe in, you breathe out, open, close. The Earth breathes with you, not in hours or days, but in continents and oceans, in ridges and trenches, in quiet cycles that move beneath the stories we call history. Tonight, you've seen an ocean's life, from its narrow beginning to its blue immensity, to its final hush beneath mountains. But oceans are not only places of geology. They hold life, they shape weather, they stir currents that link the poles to the equator. Even their death leaves gifts. The crust that sinks carries water and minerals deep underground, feeding volcanoes, shaping new landscapes, giving rise to the next breath. And so, as you return to the surface, let the rhythm of the sea remain with you, the sense that nothing, not even the vastest body of water, stays open forever. The Earth is full of memory and full of motion. You are not outside of it. You are in it, carried by it, drifting across time like a continent on a silent sea. But what becomes of the crust that vanishes into the mantle? What happens to the floor when the ocean above it is gone? Is that the end? Or is it the beginning of something warmer, something deeper still, where stone is reborn and volcanoes rise to speak once more? Chapter 6. Earthquakes and the edges of calm where plates meet. Tension builds like a breath held too long. You feel the sudden release, a jolt, a shiver, a crack through calm. These are Earth's exhalations, sometimes violent, always necessary. Without motion, there is no quaking, but also no renewal. Stillness may seem safer, but stillness is not life. You lie still tonight, cradled by the quiet weight of the planet beneath you. But not all stillness is what it seems. There is a tension beneath your rest, a slow pressure building far below. The ground feels solid. It has always felt that way, steady beneath your feet, reliable, quiet, calm. But deep down, calm has edges. And edges are where things begin to shift. Let's go there now, to the invisible borders drawn in stone, to the places where continents meet, not with open arms, but with clenched silence. These are fault lines, places of meeting, places of resistance, places of potential energy trapped in rock. You hover over one now. It looks like nothing, just a thin line running across a landscape, a crack in the crust, a forgotten scar, but it is not nothing. Beneath that line, two plates are trying to move past each other. They are supposed to slide, supposed to drift, but they don't. They stick. Stone locks against stone. Rough edges grind together, but the mantle beneath keeps moving, pushing the plates forward, even though they resist, so pressure builds. Years go by then, decades, sometimes centuries, and still the rocks hold, until they can't. In one breathless moment, the lock breaks, and the world shifts. The energy held in silence releases in sound, in motion, in rupture. This is an earthquake, a sudden reminder that nothing on this planet is ever truly still. You do not see the wave, but you feel it. First, a low hum, then a jolt. The ground rises and falls, as if remembering it can move. It is not the surface that creates the quake. It is the release of energy from deep within, a ripple moving outward from the fault, called the focus, the point of origin, and above it, the epicenter, where the shaking is strongest. You drift above this point now, watching buildings sway, branches shudder, water ripple in still cups. It lasts seconds, maybe a minute, and then stillness again. But it is not the same stillness. The earth has exhaled. Now let's slow it down, unwind the moment, and look at what just happened. The energy released in an earthquake travels in waves, not just through air, but through rock. There are P waves, primary waves, that move like sound, compressing and expanding the ground as they pass. They arrive first, fast, quiet, often unnoticed. Then come the S waves, secondary waves, slower but more dramatic. They move side to side, shaking the ground like a sheet being snapped. And finally, the surface waves, rolling, tumbling, the ones that make the earth feel as if it's breathing in ways you don't understand, together. These waves carry the story of the quake outward in all directions, and as they go, they reshape everything. Some earthquakes are barely a whisper, a sigh of release, felt only by the deepest senses. Others are deafening, devastating, measured in collapsed homes, broken roads, in lives interrupted. But even the most powerful quakes begin with the same quiet story. A crack, a push, a release. You drift now to the San Andreas Fault, winding through California like a snake of stone. Here the Pacific Plate and North American Plate slide past one another. A transformed boundary, they do not collide. They rub, scraping in long, locked friction, waiting for a slip. Every few decades, the slip comes, some small, some vast. The land shifts a few feet in seconds, and everything built on top must adapt or fall. But there are other kinds of boundaries. Two drift to a subduction zone, like the one off the coast of Japan. Here, one plate dives beneath another, not gently, but persistently. The locked plates bend, the crust bulges, and then, one day, the lock fails, the seafloor lifts, water above it rises, and what began as a deep release becomes a tsunami, a wall of water racing across the sea, carrying the echo of stone into villages and cities that never saw it coming. Earthquakes do not choose their shape. They simply follow the stress that has built over time. But still, they are not punishment, not cruelty, just motion delayed, then delivered. You may ask, why doesn't the earth just move gently? Why store up so much energy, only to let it go all at once? Because the crust is brittle, and brittle things don't bend easily. They resist. And resistance, over time, becomes pressure. The earth, like you, holds tension, and sometimes it must release it suddenly to become whole again. But earthquakes do more than shake. They teach, they reveal where the crust is weakest, where faults lie hidden, where the past is still writing the present. Geologists study these motions to read the future. They map faults, measure slips, drill into rock that remembers movement. Every quake leaves a trail, not just in the ground, but in time. You pass over ancient quake zones now, places where old ruptures changed the course of rivers. Lifted hills, split valleys. You float above the new Madrid seismic zone. Quiet now, but once the site of quakes, so strong they rang church bells 1,000 miles away. Even the middle of a continent can shake when old faults wake, and below it, all the mantle still moves, always moving, always pressing, always changing what seems fixed now. Think for a moment, what if there were no earthquakes, no tension, no release? At first, it sounds peaceful, a world of perfect stillness, no shaking, no loss, no fear, but also no change. Fault lines would still be there, but frozen. The plates above them unmoving. Mountains would stop rising. Oceans would stop shifting. Volcanoes would go silent. The carbon cycle would halt without movement. There is no renewal, no new landscapes, no fresh minerals from deep below, no reshaping of the surface to meet the needs of what lives on top. Stillness may seem safe, but stillness is not life. Life requires motion, even uncomfortable motion, even risk, the same way a seed must break to grow. The crust must quake to breathe. Now rise, slowly back through the fault, through the shaking earth, through the plates that grind like sleeping giants. Feel the echo of the quake soften. The energy disperses. The crust resets. But never quite the same, and neither are you. There's a kind of respect that grows from understanding the earth's unpredictability, not fear, but humility, knowing that everything solid can shift, and that even what seems stable is only resting between changes. You lie still again, but you feel different now, not anxious, just aware of motion beneath the calm, because the calm is not the absence of energy, it is the waiting dot, and from this waiting, all things rise, volcanoes, mountains, oceans, continents, life itself. But what happens when the motion is too much, when pressure builds faster than the earth can release? What lies beyond the rupture? You begin to drift again, this time toward fire, to the places where motion turns into heat, and heat breaks through the crust in fountains of light, because earthquakes are only part of the breath. The other part is eruption, and somewhere ahead, a mountain waits to break open. Chapter 7. Life shaped by the shifting earth plate tectonics is not just geology, it's biology too. Continents moving created isolation, collision, and diversity. You trace how animals evolved along spreading ridges and sunken trenches. You see how movement gives life new rooms to grow. Stillness, though gentle, can close the door. Tonight, you begin in a quiet forest. Leaves rustle above, roots, wind below, and between them the stillness of now. But look closer. Every tree, every bird call, every fern tells a story that began in the bones of the earth. This is not just a forest, it's a record of movement. Because life, as it turns out, is shaped by the slow dance of stone. You may have thought tectonic plates only shaped mountains and oceans, but they also shaped creatures, their homes, their migrations, their isolation, and from isolation, newness is born. You lie back against the moss and close your eyes, and just beneath your spine, continents drift. You are floating once more, but this time through history not of rocks, but of living things. Let's return to a time long before your forest, a time when nearly all of Earth's land was gathered into one Pangaea. It was a supercontinent, stretched across the equator, a single landmass where reptiles roamed from pole to pole, where shallow seas glittered between deserts, and where life moved without boundary. But Pangaea didn't last. It cracked. It split. It drifted, and as the continents pulled apart, so did life. What was once one connected garden became many smaller worlds, each with its own light, its own weather, its own paths to follow. You drift now between two pieces of that broken puzzle. To the west, what will become South America? To the east, what will become Africa? As the Atlantic Ocean slowly opens between them, birds that once shared skies now evolve in separate winds. Frogs begin to croak different songs, and flowering plants branch into colors no longer shared. This is vicariance, the splitting of species by shifting land, and with every continental drift, evolution is nudged, pushed, invited to explore. Now fly north across what will become Europe and Asia. Here, colliding plates raise mountain ranges. Like the Himalayas, not just a barrier of stone, but of biology. As peaks rise, they divide populations. Birds that once flew through open skies now settle on either side of the range. In time, their feathers change, their calls shift. They become new species because the land beneath them no longer connects. Earth's slow rearrangement becomes nature's grand experiment, and sometimes the plates don't divide, they bring together. Let's descend now into a rainforest in Central America. You hear the buzzing of insects, the calls of parrots, the laughter of monkeys in the canopy. This place didn't always exist for millions of years. North and South America were islands, separate worlds with separate lives. Then a small piece of ocean floor rose. Volcanoes built a narrow bridge, the Isthmus of Panama, in one of Earth's slowest steps. A connection was made. Suddenly, animals from the north walked south, and animals from the south climbed north. Armadillos wandered up, bears wandered down. Species mingled. Some thrived, some vanished. It was messy, beautiful, transformative, and it all began because plates moved. Now let's go deep, beneath the continents, beneath the light dot to the hydrothermal vents along a mid-ocean ridge. Here, in the complete absence of sunlight, life blooms. Giant tube worms, blind crabs, bacteria that feast on chemicals instead of light. This ecosystem doesn't just tolerate the movement of the earth, it depends on it. Without seafloor spreading, without cracks in the crust, there would be no vents, no warmth, no life here at all. This is geosynthesis, a way of living powered not by sun, but by Earth's inner heat. And it reminds us, life doesn't need calm. It needs opportunity. Even in darkness, where the planet breathes hot metal, life finds a way. Now come up again, to a coastline. Any coastline, they are always changing. As continents shift, sea levels rise and fall. Shores advance, retreat, split into islands. Islands are special. Isolated, surrounded, they become laboratories of evolution. Picture Australia. Its marsupials, kangaroos, wombats, koalas, developed in solitude. Cut off from the rest of the world, these mammals took a different path. They raise their young in pouches. They move in hops and sideways sprawls. Elsewhere, placental mammals were rising to dominance. But not here. Here, isolation shaped everything. On islands, even birds forget how to fly. With no predators, wings become unnecessary. On New Zealand, the moa grew tall and heavy. The kiwi grew small and shy. But with isolation comes vulnerability. When the plates move again, when humans arrive, when predators return, that balance breaks. Still, it's a reminder. The Earth's movement builds both diversity and fragility. And it's not just animals, plants, too, evolved along these lines. The flowers you pass on a walk are shaped by which lands split when, by which seeds traveled, by which winds found a way across a narrowing seed dot. Now think of human beings. Our story, too, is written in drifting stone. Our earliest ancestors walked in Africa, a continent that had once been at the center of Pangaea. It held the heart of the supercontinent, and when the land split, it kept its warmth, its complexity. As the Great Rift Valley opened, hominins followed the fault lines, finding water, food, shelter in its shifting cracks. Later, tectonic uplift created climate shifts, grasslands spread, forests retreated, and walking became a better strategy than climbing. Our feet, our stride, our long legs, all trace back to the shaping of land. Even our migration out of Africa, across Eurasia, into what? The Americas followed the connections made and broken by plate motion. Everywhere we went, we adapted. And everywhere we adapted began as a story beneath the soil. You begin to see it now. That life on Earth isn't just supported by geology, it's sculpted by it. The very definition of a biome desert, rainforest, tundra, is born from plate location. Mountains cast shadows that create arid lands. Uplift drives rainfall on one side, and dryness on the other. Volcanoes make soil rich. Rift valleys create lakes. Continental drift shapes wind and ocean currents, which in turn shape climate, which in turn shape life. It is all connected. You, the fox in the forest, the whale in the trench, the fern on the cliff, the beetle in the sand, all held in motion. Even extinction follows the lines. When continents collide, habitats disappear. When supercontinents form, climates dry. When seafloors close, currents shift. Mass extinctions have often followed big tectonic events, but so too has renewal. New niches, new beginnings, new stories. This is what movement gives, a changing stage, where life must improvise. Stillness may feel safer, but a still planet would be a silent one. No mountain ranges, no rainforests, no deep-sea vents, no drifting islands of life evolving in secret. Stillness is not life. Stillness is memory with no chance to grow. You lie still again, but within you, and beneath you the earth still shifts, and that is why you're here. Your lungs rise and fall, your cells divide. You change not despite the earth's motion, but because of it. The ground below is not a platform. It is a participant, a partner. You are part of a world that moves. So what comes next? What happens when movement reaches the sky? When Earth's breath not only lifts mountains, but weathers them down again? When wind and rain meet rock, and stone becomes soil, and soil becomes life again? You are almost there, to the moment, when erosion takes the stage, soft and strong, sculpting the future from the bones of the past. Chapter 8. The hypothetical halt, if it stopped. What if Earth's breath froze, plates ceased to drift? You glide into this imagined stillness, listening for its quiet consequences. Volcanoes go silent, earthquakes fade, mountains grow tired, but so does Earth's renewal. And under the calm, a tension grows. Tonight, you drift toward silence, but not just any silence, a silence so vast, so strange, it presses against the edges of the possible. You followed Earth's motion through stone and story, watched plates shift, continents divide, oceans breathe open and closed. But what if it all stopped? What if the great conveyor belt beneath your feet ground to a halt? No more spreading ridges, no more subduction zones, no more hidden drift. A world at rest, not in pause, but in final stillness. Let's glide into this imagined world together, like a feather falling onto a frozen sea. At first, it seems peaceful. The shaking ends. No more earthquakes. No more fault lines groaning in the dark. Cities built on stability. Towers no longer worrying about what lies beneath. The volcanoes, too, go quiet. No smoke above the mountaintops. No ash to blanket skies. No rivers of fire. The hot breath of earth, hell.u float above the ring of fire. But there is no more ring. No more fire. Just a chain of extinct giants, cold and crumbling. Once living stone, now monuments to a world that moved. Beneath the surface, magma chambers. Cool, the mantle stiffens. Convection currents slow, then stop. The engine is off, and at first glance, everything seems calm, but not all quiet is peace. You drift further. Now, to the heart of the continents, mountains begin to slouch. They are no longer fed by the slow push of colliding plates. No new ridges. No fresh uplift. They begin their slow surrender to wind, to rain, to gravity. Without motion, erosion has the final word. The Himalayas stop growing. Everest lowers, stone by stone, century by century. The Alps soften. The Andes lean into time. The Earth's surface begins to smooth, not overnight, but over millions of years. Without resistance from below, there is nothing to lift the landscape up. The world becomes a worn shell, rounded, lower, quieter, even the continents. Once drifting toward and away, now sleep in place. No more collisions, no more separations. Australia stays where it is. Africa never joins Europe. The Atlantic holds its breath, neither shrinking nor growing. It is a world of frozen geography. Now look below. The crust is no longer recycled. No subduction pulling old ocean floor down into the deep. No melting plates rising again as magma. No renewal. The seafloor becomes a museum, a fossil record with no curator. Old crust stacks up, grows stale, loses heat, the planet cools, and with that cooling, life begins to feel the loss. Volcanoes once brought minerals to the surface, made soil rich, fed forests and fields. Now the land grows poor. Lacking nutrients, it struggles to host abundance. You walk through a grassland that's thinning. The trees hold fewer leaves. The rivers run slower, fed by landscapes that no longer change. Fewer mountain chains mean fewer rain shadows, fewer climate zones. Weather patterns grow predictable, but also less generous. Biodiversity fades like color, draining from fabric. Without movement, there are no new habitats, no island bridges, no deep-sea ridges to cradle strange new creatures. Species plateau, then decline. And when extinction comes, as it always does, there is no rebound, no newly uplifted lands to repopulate, no volcanic islands to recolonize, no room to evolve in. Life is not just surviving, it is stranded. You pass over coral reefs, still bright but beginning to bleach. There is no tectonic uplift to raise new shores, no volcanism to build future homes. The planet begins to feel old, not in age, but in weariness. A tired globe with no rhythm. Even the air changes, without new volcanoes. Carbon dioxide from deep within no longer replenishes the atmosphere. Over eons, CO levels drop. The planet cools, rain falls softer. Winters stretch longer. Glaciers grow again, not from climate cycles, but but from planetary fatigue. This slow freeze is not dramatic. It is a sigh to long held. You float over frozen lakes in places that once held warm seas. There is no catastrophe, only inertia. The Earth is not dead, but it is no longer alive in the way it once was. And yet, even here, in this imagined halt, you begin to feel something stir, a question forming in the cracks beneath stillness. Can anything truly stop forever? The mantle is thick, but it holds heat. Residual warmth from long ago, from the Earth's birth, from radioactive decay, from pressure still locked inside. Stone, dot, and heat, like life, hates confinement. What if, after millions of years, one pocket of heat rises again? A plume, a breath, a whisper of convection. Beneath the quiet crust, a slow bubble begins. It presses upward. Just a little, the crust above it thins. Just a little, and the silence begins to crack. The ground hums. A fracture appears in stone. Gas escapes, and far in the future, a new volcano rumbles. Perhaps the Earth cannot stay still. Perhaps motion, however slow, is part of its design. You rise again from this imagined stillness, this frozen dream, and you understand now that motion is not chaos, it is care. Without it, the planet forgets how to renew, how to evolve, how to grow. Stillness feels safe, but safety is not life. You feel this truth settle into your breath, the same breath the Earth takes in ridges and trenches, in faults and folds. This planet lives because it moves. It thrives because it changes. And though its movements may sometimes shake, or burn, or drift us apart, they are also what bind us to everything that grows. Now you listen again. Beneath your still body, the real Earth still turns, still warms, still shifts, and that motion, that slow, molten breath, does not threaten your rest. It deepens it, because to sleep, you do not need a frozen world. You need rhythm, and rhythm lives in motion. But what drives that motion? Why does the mantle stir at all? What force breathes through solid rock, rises like fire, sinks like ancient memory? Ahead of you, a single thread runs deeper into the flow beneath the crust, where the heart of heat lives still. You follow that thread now, toward the inner engine, toward the pulsing silence of the core. Chapter 9. A world without renewal. No tectonics means no new crust, no recycled rock, no CO from deep below. Over time, the air grows still, the climate shifts, and oceans weep quietly. You drift into a future Earth, peaceful but pale. A world resting too long in silence, until something stirs again. You drift now, not through layers of stone or rings of fire, but through stillness, a kind of planetary hush. The Earth, once breathing beneath your feet, has fallen into long repose. This is a world without tectonics, without drift, without churn, without renewal. A world that once moved now lingers in place. The mountains no longer grow, the trenches no longer pull, volcanoes rest like closed eyes, and the air is beginning to forget what it wants. Carried, let us move gently through this place, a planet still shaped like Earth, but quieted from within. You begin above the oceans. They still spread wide, still reflect the pale blue of a gentle sky. But if you listen carefully, you hear a kind of longing in their waves. The seafloor, once young and full of heat, has aged. Without spreading ridges, there is no new crust. Without subduction zones, there is no way for old crust to return. It simply remains growing colder, heavier, older. The mantle beneath it is no longer stirred by convection. The planet's interior heat, trapped without motion, cools slowly, year by year, and with it, something vital fades. Tectonics once helped shape the carbon cycle, bringing carbon dioxide up from the deep. Through volcanoes and seafloor vents, this co-fed plants, warmed the air, and danced through the lungs of animals. But now, the volcanoes are gone. The mantle's breath no longer rises. The deep carbon is sealed, and though erosion and weathering still draw carbon down, nothing sends it back. The carbon loop breaks, not with a crash, but with a sigh. You float now through the atmosphere, thinner than before, cooler, quieter. CoA levels fall. Photosynthesis slows, forests thin, grasses shrink, and plants begin to struggle for the very breath they once gave freely. The air is still breathable, but there is a softness to it, a kind of fading dot. Without enough carbon in the air, the planet begins to cool. Not suddenly, but inevitably. Glaciers return, snow lines creep down, polar ice spreads like a white yawn. Oceans begin to contract, locked in frozen form atop continents, and the seasons, though still familiar, grow longer in their silence. Now let us return to the crust, the land where you once stood. Without tectonics, the continents remain where they are, frozen in place like puzzle pieces never solved. There are no new mountains, no fresh ridges, no new volcanic islands to break the ocean's rhythm. Rain still falls, wind still blows, but erosion has no competition. The highlands wear down, the cliffs soften, and over millions of years the continents smooth into plains. The land becomes uniform, not because it was designed that way, but because nothing interrupts. Time's slow hands. You walk across one of these plains now. The soil is thin, the air is cool. There is life, but less of it. Without volcanism, no new minerals rise to the surface. The ground grows poor, like a field farmed too long. Ecosystems narrow. Specialized species begin to fade. Even the oceans. Feel it, their depths losing the nutrients that once upwelled along, spreading centers and trenches. This is not extinction in a single blow. It is attrition. A soft unraveling of what once bloomed in motion. Yet even here, in stillness, there is beauty. You see flocks of birds, their calls quieter but no less sweet. You pass fields of hardy moss, clinging to the soil like memory. You hear the ocean, still crashing, still singing, though the notes grow lower each year. The planet has not died, but it has begun to fade, and still. Something stirs, because even in this imagined stillness, the earth is not entirely at rest. There are whispers in the deep of residual warmth, of hidden pressure, of trapped energy searching for escape. You drift now to a region long forgotten, beneath an ancient continent. A spot of heat still lingers in the mantle. Not much, but enough, over millions of years, that heat pools. It has nowhere to go, no rising current to carry it, but heat waits patiently. Eventually, the pressure builds, the rocks above weaken, cracks form, and then a plume, slow, silent, but rising. You follow it. It moves not with urgency, but with certainty, like memory returning, and finally, the crust above begins to bulge. Just slightly, a field lifts, a ridge splits, and from that fracture, gas, heat, molten rock, a volcano is born. Not a mountain of rage, but a whisper of renewal. You watch it grow. You feel the warmth spread. You see ash fall, and from that ash, new soil, Rich, mineral dense, alive. Mosses arrive, then grasses, then insects, then birds. The air carries more. Carbon now not too much, but enough. The weather shifts. A nearby glacier begins to melt. In one place, life finds motion again, and that is all it needs. You rise into the sky, watching this tiny circle of activity, like an ember in a sea of ash dot. It is not tectonics, not yet, but it is something, perhaps. Tectonics cannot be erased, only delayed, because the planet still holds warmth, still holds pressure, still longs to move, and where there is heat, there is hope. You float backward now, gently retracing your path through the silence. You pass forests grown thinner, oceans grown still, mountains grown low, but now you carry the memory of a spark. You know that stillness is never permanent, that even in the quietest corners of time, the earth listens for its cue, because a world without renewal may be peaceful, but it is incomplete, and even the most delicate silence longs, eventually, to be broken by the soft sound of becoming. You drift into the stars now, carrying that thought with you, and just before you leave the sky behind, you see Earth from a distance, pale but glowing faintly. A whisper of movement waiting to return. But what exactly returns? What is it that makes this planet so restless, so alive, so unwilling to remain at rest? Perhaps, to understand that, you must go deeper still, not into rock, but into heat itself, because motion begins not in crust, or mantle, or plate, but in the heart of the earth. Chapter 10. The Long Memory of Moving Stones. Summary: the earth has paused before, but never stopped. You look back at long dormancies, ancient shifts, slow reawakenings. In every rock is a memory of motion, of warmth, of rising. You close your eyes to the rhythm of a world that never truly rests. Even stillness is just the breath between beats. You rest tonight on the edge of memory, not your memory, but the earth's. A memory held not in words or pictures, but in stone, stone that has moved. Stone that is broken, stone that has waited for ages to stir again. You are floating now above a high desert. Wind cuts gently across wide, sleeping rocks. Their colors, reds, ochres, grays, tell a story older than bone, older than trees, older than the sky as we know it. This is a land that once lay beneath oceans, then became mountain, then sank again, then rose. Each layer is a whisper, each crack a pause, each fossil a forgotten line in Earth's long poem, because the Earth, though it turns daily, thinks in cycles too large for us to see, unless we listen long enough. So listen with me now. To the stones they remember a time when the earth, too, grew still. Not completely, but nearly. We call them supercontinent cycles, vast pulses in the planet's rhythm. Pangea, yes, but before it there was Rodinia, and before that Columbia, and before that still fragments, unsure of their names. Drifting through the haze of early time, each supercontinent rose from a chaotic swirl of drifting plates, and each, in time, fell apart again. The earth paused, then moved, waited, then shattered. Each time, life responded. Each time, the atmosphere changed. Each time, the climate danced to a new song. These were not gentle transitions. Sometimes they came with fire, sometimes with ice, sometimes with both, but always motion returned, even after hundreds of millions of years. Even after the plates seemed locked, the cycle began again, So what stirs the motion after so long a rest? The answer lies deep, not just in the mantle, but in the heat trapped within. The core of the earth has not cooled, not fully, and perhaps it never will. Its heat flows upward, softly but steadily, like the exhale of an ancient sleeper. This heat drives the convection in the mantle, the slow looping currents that press against the crust from below. And as long as that heat remains, the story continues. Even when the surface is quiet, the deep layers move, just a little, just enough, until eventually rock yields, a crack forms, a ridge opens, a new plate boundary is born, and with it a new chapter. You pass now above the Canadian Shield, some of the oldest rock on the planet. It has seen supercontinents come and go. Its minerals remember the tug and twist of tectonics, long faded, and even though it rests now, flat and exposed to sky, its memory is not gone. It waits because stone, like music, holds on to rhythm long after the instruments fall silent. Now drift south, to the floor of an ancient sea, the Tethys, long since vanished. Its sediments are folded now into the Alps, the Himalayas, the Zagros. There was a time when this ocean hummed with life. Now it echoes as limestone and marble pressed into peaks. This is how Earth remembers, by transforming what once was into something that rises again. Even the Great Rift Valley in Africa, where the continent is slowly splitting, speaks of a motion just beginning. The plates here are young. They stretch, crack, form faults, invite magma upward. A new ocean may form here, millions of years from now. A sliver of water between what was once one. This, too, is memory. Not backward-looking, but forward-reaching, because the earth does not forget how to move. It only pauses to take a breath, and what a breath it is, measured in millions of years. Long, slow, almost imperceptible, but never lost. You glide now beneath the crust, into the upper mantle. It flows, not like water, but like warm wax beneath a hand. Soft, resistant, alive, and even now you can feel it pulsing. A subtle beat, the same one that cracked Rodinia, that opened the Atlantic, that lifted the Andes. This beat is not random. It follows patterns, thermal cycles, tidal forces, radioactive decay within the planet's bones, and perhaps something more. Perhaps the Earth moves because it was born from motion, from collapse, from fusion, from the violent dance of stars and dust. You see it now, how every piece of Earth carries that echo, from iron at the center to basalt at the crust's edge. Nothing here has ever truly rested, only waited, and in that waiting there is always the possibility of return. Even you, at rest tonight, are not truly still. Your heart moves, your lungs, your thoughts. Stillness is never absolute. It is only the space between what was and what will be, and so it is with Earth, even in its longest sleep. The planet remembers how to wake, and it will. You rise now, slowly, back through stone, back through time, carrying with you the weight of what you've seen, but it does not burden you. It soothes you because you understand now that motion is not the opposite of peace. It is peace. Made visible, the earth moves, not to disturb you, but to shape you, to host you, to remind you that all things must change to continue being themselves. You lie back once more, body against bed, mind against the quiet night, and somewhere below, a ridge shifts, a rock softens, a breath begins, not to end what is, but to begin again, what always was. Even stillness is just the breath between beats.